What's going on, guys? Reisshub back with another video, and in today's video I want to talk about the Dreamhack NAE East. The grand finals happened 2 days ago and I want to cover all 6 wins from it, and I want to kind of pinpoint the one pivotal moment that each of these teams took and what actually they did to win the game. Let's get into it. So let's look at game 1, which is won by Sprite and Tahi. You can notice in the 5th zone, these guys have 89 and 59 build respectively, which really isn't enough to play throughout the full endgame. Later on, while in the moving zones, Sprite picks up this huge knock on Mars OW, but also manages to pick up a second knock on Troc as well, but doesn't manage to get any of the loot. Because they don't have enough materials for this full endgame, they need to grab some of this loot. But Tahi bounce pads over as well and manages to actually secure some of the loot. They're giving him maximum materials here. This will give them enough to basically take them to the majority of endgame based on what they have here, since he already has capped materials. And they also have the fish, so they can play back of zone even if they end up running out and wasting them by being focused at some point. Then later on in the game, they make a great crash pad play to get them to the front of zone, where Tahi then opens up the floor that he has, noticing he has both the build pieces, double opens the floor up and gets a really nice pump on Frist to pick up yet another elimination. At this point, they've secured more shockwaves, so Tahi shockwaves up to take height and secures it successfully, while Sprite uses a crash pad to grab height as well. Notice how also just a small little mechanical thing with the crash pads, how he just looks up and double taps jump and goes straight up. This is something you can do. You don't actually need to switch to the crash pad at all. From then on, they just keep high, and then once it comes to the final zones closing, Sprite stays on ultimate high ground, where Tahi drops down to pick up the final few eliminations and pick up the victory royale. There's 2 main points that they won this game from. Firstly, it was the time where they eliminated Trocs, picked up the loot and got capped mats. This kept them going throughout the entire endgame. And then that second point was the elimination on Frist, which gave them more materials and more shockwaves to take high ground from at that point, which overall won them the game. So moving on to game 2, which was won by Aspect and Zunies. Their kind of clear play that they won was this real almost kind of 50-50 play that Aspect took towards the end game. They'd kind of layered themselves at second height, and he looked up to spray at height and got a massive beam off on the player up there. Notice how he moves to the back of the box to where the back of zone is, so you can shockwave to height here. This has the largest amount of potential to knock down the stuff above him because he intentionally layered himself beneath their builds. This kind of gives him that guaranteed high ground. It didn't exactly work like that, but what it did do was make him come up behind the opponent, pick up a one big pump shot, and this secured high ground for these guys. So as the first 2 games already won to shockwave plays taking high ground, and then these guys just knowing how to maintain it and fragging out for those last few players and picking up the victory royale. Game 3 was won by Calc and Furious, and they won the game much earlier. They did this in the 3rd zone because guess what? They set up in the center of 3rd. They also got the 4th zone because of this, and obviously they did luck out getting 5th zone as well. This is the 3 wins that we've seen so far, all get 5th zone. Maybe a correlation between those two, not having to use their materials and kind of their heals to get into the 5th zone, but it's not been a huge detriment in my eyes when they haven't. However, just a little trend we've seen between the 3 games so far. Furious manages to pick up a nice elimination here, which also gets him more materials, so these guys are pretty set up for the endgame purely based on this. They play a nice consistent endgame, don't go for many eliminations because they don't really need it since they already have those materials. Getting towards the endgame, there is a little bit of server lag in the replay, which I won't put in the video obviously, but while they're taking height, Furious is consistently looking up through his floors, sees an opportunity to take it, and just ramps over the team on height and secures the height for him and Calc. He then drops all of his white heals to Calc so that he can stay on the ultimate high ground with all the height when he drops down, going for those frags. And while the last player tries to bounce pad up, Calc kicks a nice shot, picking up the victory royale. This one was pretty simple. They got center of 3rd zone, didn't use many materials to rotate, and then had good mats for the endgame. Played their endgame out really efficiently, not managing to waste many materials, going for too many eliminations as they didn't really need them because they already had the materials for it. And then were consistently looking up towards height, saw an opportunity for it, and took it. Game 4 was won by Frat and Bank, and these guys yet again got the 5th zone, so that's 4 games out of 4 games so far. They didn't have that many materials from the early and mid game. They obviously had a tough rotate to get to this point in the game, so they had roughly around 50 builds each. They played the start of the moving zones relatively well, but unfortunately just kept getting scuffed, kept getting spread apart when using their mobility, and ended up with no materials, and this resulted in Frat going down in the 7th zone. At this point, Bank just completely popped off. He posted on his Twitter, I would go and check it out if you want to see it from an actual recording perspective rather than the replay mode, and with their comms, it is a very, very hype moment. But in all honesty, there wasn't one big shot, one big play that Bank made. It was just over and over again, consistent eliminations as it goes on, playing extremely well. This is one of the things I like about duos, is the fact that there's clutch potential for solos. In particular, he made one really psycho play, jumping straight into the box of 2 players who's behind him. However, it only worked because these guys had no materials and they were tunnel visioning. They knew they needed an elimination or 2 to get them through the endgame, so they were both just super focused, double spraying, and this allowed Bank to come in the wall behind them and pick up an elimination on one of the players, getting him more materials to keep him through the endgame. He just then consistently played out, picking up more and more eliminations as the game went on, and picked up a huge victory royale there. Game 5 was picked up by the XSET duo of Shark and Knight. And if you know anything about these guys' playstyle already from watching the FNCS trios, it's very similar. However, this game they kind of turned that all on its head by playing height. Yet again, they got center third, and then they got the 4th zone because of this. However, unlike all 4 of our other matches, these guys actually got a max distance 5th zone. How did they rotate this? Well, because they landed Fortilla, they got the peppers, so they used a shockwave bouncer, but also both popped a pepper before they did this, because they knew that they're going to get split, and this allows them to get back together quickly. Before doing this, Shark notices that there's nobody on high ground at the area where 5th zone has just appeared, and it's really easy to take. So after shockwave bouncering, he then uses a second shockwave and claims height exactly where he pinpointed his marker to be. They then maintain height all the way through the end game and win the game because of this. One of the things that they did on high ground completely mirrors the way that they play low ground. They stayed to the dead side of the zone, spraying down on the people down below. Now, why would you want to stay to the dead side of the zone when you're playing height? Well, the dead side, or in this case on the far right hand side of the zone, allows you a bigger angle to look at the players below because you have a right hand peek over the floor that you have below you. Essentially, it gives you more angles to take shots on players down below and give you more eliminations. So it's funny to me how their playstyle consistently replicated from low ground all the way up to high ground, but they still picked up the victory royale either way. I'd be very surprised if this duo does not do extremely well if there are any more duo competitions coming up. And Game 6, our last but certainly not our least victory, was won by the extra duo of Vert and Caleb. These are guys who are the only ones from a different region to actually win a game. There are a lot of EU and NA West duos that qualified for this finals, but this was the only one who actually managed to win a game. These guys were set up really well in the 5th zone with a ton of materials and just consistently stayed ahead of the zone over and over again. While I went over this big mountain zone, they just consistently managed to use the crash pads to get themselves down onto the low ground if it ended up going down, which it did a lot. Caleb popped off with a total of 5 eliminations, and all of these were crucial to consistently get these guys more and more materials in their endgame. Vert also made a really nice play to crash pad the player above that he saw was on the box adjacent to his, used the crash pad to pick up eliminations, and again, this was another play that really kept them moving in this endgame. The one that picked up the victory for them, however, was when Vert realized that it was a 2v2 situation and that the team above had a bandy cannon. This meant that he had to basically go up and take height because the zone was about to pull up a hill. They didn't have enough materials to go up, so they had to make a play to do this. He used a crash pad to go up and took a shot on the other team, didn't manage to pick up any eliminations, but managed to secure height from this. And this actually won them the entire game. If he hadn't have done this, the only thing that would have happened is they would have lost. Team on height had more materials, they had white heels in the bandy cannon, and it was going up a hill. So this was basically one of the only plays they could have made to secure it. It was a psycho play, but if he'd been eliminated, it wouldn't have mattered because they would have come second anyway. So this was the key play that made them win the game. So the biggest trend between all 6 of these wins is the fact that 5 out of the 6 teams managed to get that 5th zone on top of them exactly. Now I'm going to be really interested to see if this is consistent throughout other tournaments for duos specifically, because obviously getting the 5th zone does really help you out. The amount of materials that you have to commit into that 5th zone rotate, if it's maxed, is a lot. And if you don't have many kind of shockwaves or bouncers to shockwave bouncer this, it can really be a devastating end to your tournament trying to get into 5th zone. We've seen plenty of times in previous tournaments there are ways that you can rotate into this 5th zone and win the game, but just a little interesting trend that I saw that 5 out of the 6 teams actually got that 5th zone. XSET duo being the only one who didn't manage to actually get that 5th zone and still managed to pick up a victory royale by actually taking height and maintaining it all the way through. Very interesting to see. Can't wait for more tournaments. NA West is coming up next week. I'll be doing the same kind of review on that as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. Catch you later. Peace.